And 3 weeks ago, I sat in a room where my entire family was smiling because they thought they were about to inherit millions. My parents did not even try to hide it. My dad had already lined up a realtor. My mom came dressed like it was a celebration, new handbag, perfect makeup, perfect smile. They were not grieving. They were waiting. Waiting for my grandfather's will to turn them into rich people. But then the lawyer opened the envelope. He read the first line. And everything changed. My mother screamed. My father shoved back his chair and lunged for the document, and that is when the lawyer suddenly turned his head and looked straight at me. Only me, he said calmly. Your grandfather left instructions. I am only supposed to read the next part, if they reacted exactly like this. Silence dropped over the room like a hammer, because in that instant I realized something terrifying. My grandfather had not passed down an inheritance. He had set a condition designed to reveal the truth about my family. Now let me take you back to Millbrook, Ohio. To the day my grandfather's lawyer called me and said, Andrea, you need to be here on Friday. Your grandfather insisted. The drive from Columbus to Millbrook takes about 2.5 hours if you do not hit construction on Route 71. I have made that drive so many times I could do it with my eyes closed. Every rest stop, every pothole, every stretch of flat Ohio farmland between here and there. Millbrook is the kind of town where the gas station attendant knows your grandmother's maiden name. Population 4,000. One traffic light. And for 60 years the biggest employer was Townsend and Sons, my grandfather's construction supply company. He built it from a single delivery truck and a handshake. By the time he sold the business and retired, half the buildings in 3 counties had Townsend's materials in their walls. Grandpa Walter was 82 when he died. Peacefully, they said, though I am not sure anything about those last few years was peaceful. I drove down for the funeral on a Tuesday. The leaves were just starting to turn. I remember gripping the steering wheel too tight, my knuckles white, telling myself I would not fall apart in public. When I got to the funeral home, I expected to be the first one there. I always was. I was not. My parents, my dad Greg and my mom Diane had arrived the night before. That alone was strange. They lived in Columbus too, 40 minutes from me, but I had not seen them in almost 5 months. We were not officially estranged. We just existed in the same city without touching. I found my mom in the foyer hugging a woman I did not recognize, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. He was like a father to me, she was saying. This family meant everything to him. I stood in the doorway and watched her perform. That is the only word for it. Perform. She had a tissue in her left hand and a compact mirror in her right, checking that the mascara was running in the correct direction. Grief as presentation. Sorrow with staging. My dad was across the hall talking to someone in a suit I did not recognize. They were speaking in low voices. My dad doing that thing he does when he is trying to seem important, chest out, chin up, one hand in his pocket, like he is posing for a campaign ad. He had not called me to say Grandpa died. I had found out from Aunt Ruth. I stood there for a long time, before anyone noticed me. When my mom finally looked up and saw me, she smiled. The tight, controlled smile she used when company was present, and said, "Oh, Andrea, there you are." Like I was late to a dinner party. Like I had not just driven 2.5 hours with tears blurring the highway lines. And I did not understand yet why any of that mattered. But I would. The service was standing room only. Grandpa Walter had touched a lot of lives in Millbrook. The florist, the hardware store owner, 3 generations of families who had worked at Townsend and Sons. They all came. My mom organized the seating. She organized the program. She organized who would speak, and in what order. And when I asked if I could read something, a poem Grandpa had loved, she put her hand on my arm and said very gently, "Greg will speak, honey. He is the son. It should come from him." So my dad stood at the podium in a suit that still had the price tag crease across the shoulders. And he read a eulogy that sounded like it was pulled from a template online. He called Grandpa Walter a pillar of the community. He talked about family values and the importance of hard work. He mentioned a book Grandpa supposedly loved, got the title wrong. It was Hemingway, not Steinbeck. Grandpa would have hated that. He also said Dad always put family first. And I watched 3 people in the front pew look at the floor at the same time. The whole thing lasted 4 minutes. 4 minutes for 82 years of a man's life. 4 minutes from someone who had not spoken to that man in over 2 years. I sat in the third row, hands folded in my lap jaw, clenched so tight my teeth ached. I had a folded piece of paper in my jacket pocket, the poem I had wanted to read, Mary Oliver. Grandpa used to say her writing sounded like somebody who actually paid attention to the world. I kept the paper in my pocket. It stayed there for weeks. Next to me, my great-aunt Ruth, Grandpa Walter's younger sister, reached over and squeezed my hand. She did not say anything for a long time. Then very quietly, almost under the organ music, "Your grandfather knew, honey. He always knew." I looked at her. Knew what? She just patted my hand and faced forward. After the service, people filed past to pay their respects. I waited until the line was gone, then stood alone by the casket for a few minutes. I told him I was sorry I had not come the Thursday before he died. I had had a double shift at the library. I had planned to come that Sunday instead. He did not make it to Sunday. When I finally walked outside, Greg was waiting by the parking lot. He did not offer condolences. He said, "You still have the key to Dad's house, right? We need to get in there and start sorting things." I drove to Grandpa's house the next morning. The house on Oak Hill Road, white clapboard green shutters, a porch swing that had not swung right since 2019. My grandmother Maggie had planted hydrangeas along the front walk. They were still blooming somehow. Nobody was watering them. They just kept going. The front door was unlocked. I found my parents in Grandpa's study. The desk drawers were pulled open. File folders were spread across the floor. My dad was on his knees in front of the filing cabinet, flipping through papers so fast he was tearing the edges. My mom stood behind him, arms crossed, directing. "Check the bottom drawer." He always kept the important stuff at the back. "What are you looking for?" I said from the doorway. My dad did not look up. "Insurance papers." He was lying. I tell because I had known him my whole life, and the only time Greg Townsend moved with urgency was when money was involved. They were not looking for insurance papers. They were looking for the will. "Dad, the lawyer, has all of that." "Mr. Finch." "I know who Harold Finch is." He stood up, a folder in his hand. "This is my father's house. I do not need permission to be here." My mom turned to me. The look she gave it was not anger. It was dismissal. The kind of look you give a child who has wandered into a room they do not belong in. I stepped back. Old habit. Every time I had ever pushed back even a little, my mom would go silent for days. No calls, no texts, nothing. A week of nothing. When I was 14, that silence felt like the end of the world. At 27, it still made my stomach drop. I left. 20 minutes later, sitting in my car, in the Walgreens parking lot, with the engine running, my phone rang. The caller ID said Finch and Associates. Andrea said, a voice I recognized from family dinners 15 years ago. "This is Harold Finch. Your grandfather left specific instructions. You need to be at my office this Friday. And Andrea, do not tell your parents what I am about to say." Harold Finch had been Grandpa Walter's lawyer for 25 years. He had handled the sale of Townsend and Sons. He had drawn up the trust when Grandma Maggie got sick. He was the kind of man who wore the same brown suit to every occasion, and never raised his voice above a conversational murmur. So when he told me on the phone that my grandfather had rewritten his will 4 years ago, and that the new version was substantially different from anything my parents expected, I believed him. "Walter changed everything in 2022. Finch said. "Right after your father had him moved to Sunrise Meadows." Sunrise Meadows. The name alone made my chest tight. It was the cheapest assisted living facility in the county. Linoleum floors, shared rooms, the smell of industrial cleaner that never quite covered up what it was trying to cover. A television in the common room that was always tuned to game shows nobody was watching. Grandpa Walter, a man who had built a company worth millions, who had once hosted the governor at his dining table, who had put 3 employees' kids through college because he believed in investing in people. He spent his last years in a place that charged $2,400 a month because his son picked it out of a brochure without visiting a single facility in person. I had been to Sunrise Meadows more times than I could count. I knew the nurses by name. I knew which hallway smelled worst on Tuesdays. I knew the crack in the window of Grandpa's room that let cold air in every winter. And I knew because he told me just once very quietly that the first week there he cried every night. What did he change? I asked. I cannot discuss specifics over the phone, but you need to be there, Andrea. If you are not present at the reading contesting, the will becomes significantly easier for any other parties. Other parties. He meant my dad. There is one more thing, Finch said. Your grandfather also left a letter. He asked me to read it aloud in front of everyone. I sat in that Walgreens parking lot for 20 minutes after we hung up. The engine was still running. A woman walked past with a cart full of diapers and gave me a look like maybe I was having a breakdown. Maybe I was. I did not know what Grandpa had left me. I did not know what was in that letter. I only knew one thing for certain. Whatever happened on Friday, my family was never going to be the same. Here's what you need to know about my dad and my grandfather. When I was 15, Greg asked Grandpa Walter for $200,000 to open a sports bar. He had a name picked out, Townsend Tap. He had cocktail napkins printed. He did not have a business plan, a location, a liquor license, or any experience in food service. Grandpa said no. He did not say it cruelly. I know because I was in the next room doing homework, and the walls in that Oak Hill Road house were thin. I heard Grandpa say, Greg, I would give you the shirt off my back, but I am not going to fund something that will eat your savings in 6 months. Come back with a real plan, and we will talk. Greg did not come back with a plan. He came back with rage. You built your empire, but you will not let your own son build his. I am trying to protect you. You are trying to control me like always. The front door slammed. Dishes rattled in the cabinet, and that was the beginning of the end. Over the next 12 years, my dad pulled away. The visits got shorter, then less frequent, then non-existent. My mom, who had always been the one to organize holiday dinners and birthday calls, stopped organizing. She sided with Greg completely vocally, without reservation. Your father never respected Greg, she told me once when I was 19. We owe him nothing. Meanwhile, Grandpa Walter sat in his house on Oak Hill Road alone and waited for a phone call that never came. I was the one who kept driving down every Sunday. 2.5 hours there, 2.5 hours back. I would sit on the porch, swing with him, read him, whatever novel I was into that week, and eat the peach cobbler I had learned to bake from my grandmother's recipe card. He told me once, staring at the oak tree in the front yard, one day, Greg will understand what he threw away. He paused. I just hope it will not be too late. I did not understand then. I am starting to now. The night before the will reading, I called Aunt Ruth. She picked up on the first ring like she had been waiting. Ruth Dawson was 78, sharp as a tack, and the only person in our family who said exactly what she meant without padding it in politeness. She had never married. She had run the Millbrook Public Library for 30 years before I was even born. She was in a lot of ways the reason I became a librarian. Mr. Finch called me, I told her. He says I have to be there tomorrow. You do. Ruth, do you know what is in the will? A pause, then I know Walter made his choice years ago. He watched Greg leave and he watched you stay. I did not stay, for I was not trying to. I know, sweetheart. That is the whole point. She told me something then that I had not known. In 2020, when Grandpa caught pneumonia and was hospitalized for 3 weeks, Ruth had called Greg every day. Greg said, I will come this weekend on a Monday. By Friday, he had stopped answering. The following Monday, same thing. 3 weeks in the hospital, Greg never showed. I had dropped everything. I had called my supervisor at the library, explained the situation, used every sick day and vacation day I had, and drove to Millbrook General. I slept in the chair next to his bed for 11 nights. Nobody asked me to. I just did it because the alternative, leaving him alone in a hospital room with nobody, was not something I could live with. You did not do it for money, Andrea, Ruth said. And Walter knew that. That is exactly why. I stared at the wall of my apartment, a crack in the plaster I kept meaning to patch. Okay, I said. I will be there. Good. And Andrea, yeah. Wear something with pockets. You will want somewhere to put your hands. She hung up. I almost laughed. Almost. But I had no idea what was waiting in that room. And honestly, I do not think any of us did. Now, before I walk into that lawyer's office, I need to ask you something. Have you ever been the one who shows up every holiday, every hospital visit, every Sunday while everyone else has an excuse? And then when it matters, they still treat you like you do not count. Tell me in the comments. I genuinely want to hear your story, because what Grandpa Walter did next, it was for people like us. Friday, 10 o'clock a.m., Finch & Associates, Main Street, Millbrook. The office was above the old hardware store, up a narrow staircase with carpet so worn you could see the wood underneath. Harold Finch had been working out of this building since before I was born. The conference room smelled like lemon furniture polish and old paper. A long oak table ran down the center. 8 chairs, a water pitcher nobody touched. My parents were already seated when I arrived. Front row, left side, like they had gotten there early to claim their spot. My dad wore a blazer I had never seen before. My mom had her new handbag on the table in front of her, positioned just so the way you place something, you want people to notice. I took a seat at the far end near the window. Aunt Ruth sat beside me. She smelled like lavender and coffee, same as always. She did not say anything. She just sat solid and steady like a lighthouse in fog. Pastor Jim Henley from First Methodist was there too. Grandpa's church for 40 years. He had baptized me as a baby. He had officiated Grandma Maggie's funeral. He sat with his hands folded, looking at the table like a man preparing for something he would rather not witness. 2 cousins, Dave and Patty, children of Grandpa's oldest friend, filled the remaining seats. Dave kept rubbing his thumb against his index finger, a nervous habit I remembered from family picnics 20 years ago. Patty sat perfectly still, her purse in her lap, her expression unreadable. A paralegal sat in the corner with a notepad and a pen that she clicked every few seconds. The room was full but quiet, the kind of quiet that hums. My dad leaned toward my mom. He thought he was whispering. He was not. Once this is done, we call the realtor Monday. My mom nodded. She patted his arm. Then she glanced at me, a quick measuring look, and turned away like I was furniture. Harold Finch entered through a side door, carrying a leather portfolio thick enough to be a manuscript. He sat at the head of the table, adjusted his glasses, and opened the portfolio without greeting anyone. He did not smile. He did not make small talk. He just looked at the papers for a long moment, then looked up. Let us begin. Finch, read the preliminary language first, the standard stuff, the recitation of Walter Henry Townsend, resident of Millbrook, Claremont County, Ohio, being of sound mind and body. The date April 14, 2022. Witnessed by 2 parties, notarized. My dad's knee bounced under the table, tiny vibrations I could feel through the floor. Mr. Townsend's estate, Finch continued, comprises the following: the residential property at 14 Oak Hill Road, Millbrook. All savings and investment accounts held at First National Bank of Claremont County. Personal effects, including furniture, vehicles, and family heirlooms. Greg sat forward. His hands were flat on the table. Finch turned a page. He read slowly, carefully, the way someone reads when they want every word to land. Regarding my property at 14 Oak Hill Road, Millbrook, Ohio, I bequeath this property in its entirety to my granddaughter, Andrea Marie Townsend. 2 seconds of silence. My dad blinked. He looked at my mom. She looked at Finch. I am sorry, Greg said. Say that again. Finch did not repeat himself. He turned another page and kept reading. Regarding my savings accounts, investment portfolios, and all remaining financial assets, I leave them in their entirety to my granddaughter, Andrea Marie Townsend. My mother's hand went to her chest. There is a mistake. There is no mistake, Mrs. Townsend. That cannot be right. My dad's voice cracked high. He was standing now. His chair had scraped back so hard it hit the wall. That is my father. That is my father's money. Finch looked up at him over his glasses, steady, unhurried. It was his money, Mr. Townsend. He chose how to distribute it. My dad grabbed the papers off the table, just snatched them right out from under Finch's hand. Finch did not flinch. Those are copies. The originals are filed with the Claremont County Probate Court. Greg stared at the pages in his fist, then threw them on the table. They scattered like dead leaves. The room was completely still. My mom stood up. Her chair did not hit the wall. She stood with precision, the way she did everything controlled fury. He was not in his right mind. She pointed at Finch. You know that. He was 80 years old when he signed this. 78, Finch said. And the will was witnessed by 2 licensed physicians who certified his competency at the time of signing. Doctors can be wrong. These doctors were not wrong. My dad turned to me. His face was the color of raw meat. Did you do this? Did you go behind our backs? I did not know, I said. My voice came out smaller than I wanted it to. Bullshit. He slammed his palm on the table. The water pitcher shook. You were down there every week, every goddamn week, whispering in his ear. Greg. Aunt Ruth's voice cut through the room like a blade. One word, his name. But the way she said it stopped him mid-sentence. He looked at her. She looked back. 78 years old, 5'2", and she did not blink. Sit down. He sat. I had never seen my dad listen to anyone that fast. Diane recalibrated. She smoothed her blouse, collected herself, and turned to Finch with the voice she used at church fundraisers, warm, reasonable, dripping. Harold, we appreciate your diligence, but surely, Walter left something for his own son, a keepsake, anything. Finch reached into his portfolio and removed a sealed envelope, cream-colored handwritten address on the front in slightly trembling. Script I recognized immediately. There is one more item, Finch said. Your father-in-law left a personal letter. He instructed me to read it aloud, and he specified that I should do so only if his son and daughter-in-law reacted with hostility to the terms of the will. Silence. He anticipated this, Finch said. Please sit down. We are not finished. The envelope sat on the table between us like a grenade with the pin pulled. Grandpa's handwriting. I knew it the way you know a voice in a crowded room immediately without thinking. The same slightly shaky cursive he used on every birthday card he had ever sent me. The same blue ink from the same fountain pen he had kept on his desk since 1983. Across the front, in careful letters. To be read aloud at my will reading. W.T. My dad stared at it. His jaw worked like he was chewing something that would not go down. You cannot just read some letter and pretend it is legal, Diane said. Her voice had shifted. No longer warm, no longer reasonable, just sharp. Finch folded his hands on the table. This letter is not a legal document, Mrs. Townsend. It is a personal statement. Your father-in-law asked me to honor his final wish, and I intend to do so. We will contest this. Greg's voice was low. All of it. The will, the letter, everything. That is your right, Finch said. But I would advise you to listen first. Pastor Jim shifted in his seat. Dave and Patty exchanged a glance. The paralegal's pen had stopped moving. I could not stop looking at the envelope. Something about seeing Grandpa's handwriting here in this room, 3 weeks after his funeral, made him feel present, like he was sitting at the table with us. Like he had planned this exact moment down to the chair placement. Finch picked up the envelope, turned it over, ran his thumb under the seal. Before I read Walter's letter, he said. He asked me to provide some context, a brief summary of events that led to his decision. He pulled a second document from his portfolio. A single printed page. Walter compiled this himself. I only formatted it for clarity. He laid it flat on the table. Even from my end, I could read the header. Timeline of relevant events. 2018 to 2023. My father went pale. Finch read the timeline line by line. His voice stayed flat. No inflection, no judgment, just dates and facts like a court reporter. March 2018. Gregory Townsend signs power of attorney documents and arranges the transfer of Walter Townsend to Sunrise Meadows Assisted Living. Walter Townsend was not consulted. My dad opened his mouth. Finch kept reading. September 2019. Gregory Townsend lists and sells the family home at 14 Oak Hill Road without informing Walter Townsend. Walter learned of the sale from a former neighbor. Diane's eyes were on the table now. She was not looking at anyone. 2019 through 2022. No phone calls, no visits, and no written communication from Gregory or Diane Townsend to Walter Townsend. That is not Greg started. January 2020. Walter Townsend is hospitalized with severe pneumonia. Admitted to Millbrook General for 22 days. Andrea Townsend arrives within 6 hours and remains for the duration. Gregory Townsend is contacted by Ruth Dawson on 4 separate occasions. He states, he will visit this weekend. He does not visit. Ruth sat very still beside me. Her hand found mine under the table and held it. June 2021. Diane Townsend blocks Andrea Townsend's phone number on Gregory Townsend's mobile device. She informs Walter Townsend that Andrea is too busy to call. A nurse at Sunrise Meadows later reports that Andrea contacted the facility's front desk distressed, asking why her father would not answer her calls. I stopped breathing. I remembered that. The week I thought Dad had finally cut me off completely. The sick, hollow feeling. I had called the Sunrise Meadows front desk in tears, and the nurse Linda, her name was Linda, had patched me through to Grandpa directly. I never knew why Dad's phone stopped working. Now I did. I looked at my mother. She would not meet my eyes. Ruth spoke for the first time since telling Greg to sit down. Her voice was quiet and absolutely level. I called you 12 times in 2020, Greg. You picked up once and you hung up after 30 seconds. Finch set the timeline aside. He picked up the envelope again and withdrew 2 handwritten pages. The paper was cream-colored heavy stock, the same stationery Grandpa kept in his desk drawer, the kind he used for letters that mattered. Finch put on his reading glasses. The room contracted around that moment. The walls felt closer, the ceiling lower, the air thicker. I will read this exactly as Walter wrote it, Finch said. He cleared his throat. Greg. That was the first word. Just my dad's name. No dear. No my son. Just Greg. If Harold is reading this out loud, it means you came for the money. And it means you were angry when it was not yours. I am not surprised. I wish I were. My dad's hands were in his lap. His fingers were laced together so tightly the knuckles had gone white. I want you to know that I rewrote this letter 3 times. Each time I tried to be kinder, but kindness is what got us here. 30 years of kindness. 30 years of excuses I made for you. 30 years of telling myself you would come around. Pastor Jim was looking at his hands. Dave and Patty sat motionless. You are my son. I loved you from the moment your mother put you in my arms, and I have never stopped. But somewhere along the way, you stopped being my son and started being someone who is waiting for me to die. The sound that came from my father, I do not have a word for it. A breath that got stuck halfway. A sound like something cracking inside a wall you cannot see. Diane put her hand on his arm. He shook it off. Finch turned the page. I did not lose a son to death, Greg. I lost you to entitlement, and that is a grief I would not wish on anyone. Finch kept reading. Let me tell you what I remember. I remember the day you put me in Sunrise Meadows. You drove me there in my own car. You carried 1 suitcase. You did not walk me inside. You handed the suitcase to a woman at the front desk and said you had somewhere to be. I stood in that lobby for 10 minutes. Before anyone showed me to my room. The floor smelled like bleach. The mattress had a stain on it shaped like Rhode Island. That was March 15th, 2018. I remember the date because it was your mother's birthday. Patty put her hand over her mouth. I remember when you sold the house. Our house. The house where Maggie and I raised you. Where we hosted every Thanksgiving for 48 years. Where your mother planted those hydrangeas she loved so much. You sold it for $460,000. I found out from Helen Patterson next door. She called me crying. You used the money to buy a boat. Greg was staring at a point on the far wall, not blinking, not moving. And I remember Diane. She visited me once in 4 years. She brought a box of drugstore chocolates and took a photograph of herself sitting next to my bed. I saw it later on her Facebook page. The caption said, visiting Dad family first. She stayed for 20 minutes. 14 of those minutes, she was on her phone. I counted. When you are in a bed, you cannot leave. Counting is about the only thing you can do. Pastor Jim looked at Diane. It was not a glare. It was worse. It was the look of a man reassessing everything he had ever believed about someone. Every potluck she had organized. Every prayer circle she had led. Every time she had stood in the church foyer with her hand on someone's arm, saying, I will pray for you. With that practiced sincerity. He was recalculating all of it right there in real time. Diane's face was rigid, controlled, but her right hand was trembling against the table, and a blotch of red was climbing her neck like a vine. Dave was staring at the table. Patty had her hand over her mouth. The paralegal had stopped writing and was just sitting there, pen suspended, eyes wide. She never came back, not once. Finch paused, took a breath. And Diane, I know about the phone. I know you blocked Andrea's number on Greg's phone. My nurse told me after Andrea called the facility's front desk in tears, asking why her own father would not answer. You let my granddaughter believe her father had abandoned her, and you let me believe she had stopped caring. I could not breathe. The room was spinning at the edges, but the center, the letter, Finch's voice, my mother's, white face, stayed perfectly sharp. Diane stood up so fast her chair rocked backward. This is slander. Her voice cracked on the second word. He was a sick old man. He was confused. He was Mrs. Townsend. Finch's tone did not change, not 1 degree. This is a personal letter, not a legal accusation. Sit down, please. I will not sit here and be Diane. Pastor Jim spoke gently, the way he spoke from the pulpit, calm, measured, sad. Let Harold finish. She turned on him. You are taking his side. I am not taking sides. I am listening. Diane looked around the room at Dave, who would not meet her gaze at Patty, whose jaw was set at Ruth, who met her gaze head-on with an expression that could have cut glass at the paralegal still writing. She had nowhere to go. For the first time in my life, I watched my mother run out of audience. No sympathetic faces to pivot toward no convenient exit, no one willing to play the supporting role in her performance. Every person in that room had heard the same words, and every one of them was doing the math, comparing what Diane had shown them in public with what she had actually done in private. The gap was enormous. It was Grand Canyon wide. She sat down slowly, like the chair might break underneath her. I sat at my end of the table, hands flat against the wood, feeling the grain under my fingertips. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I had not said a word since I did not know. I did not trust myself to speak. I was afraid that if I opened my mouth, what came out would not be words. It would be 20 years of every swallowed sentence, every silence I chosen to keep the peace. Every time I driven home from a holiday dinner, biting the inside of my cheek until it bled. I stayed still. Grandpa's letter was doing what I never could saying, what I never dared. Finch picked up the second page. There is one final section, he said. Walter wrote this part for Andrea. He looked at me across the table. For the first time all morning, his expression softened just slightly, just at the corners of his eyes. May I continue? I nodded. My father did not look at me. My mother did not look at anyone. Finch began to read. I have to pause here for a second, because when the lawyer turned that page toward me, my hands were shaking. I did not know Grandpa had written something just for me. If this story is hitting you the way it hit me, drop a comment and tell me, what would you do if you found out your own parents had been lying about you to your own grandparent, that they had cut you off and let him think you did not care? Now, let me tell you what Grandpa Walter wrote next. Andrea. Finch's voice changed when he read my name. Warmer. The way Grandpa would have said it. You never missed a Sunday, not one. In 4 years, you drove 2.5 hours each way every single week to sit with an old man who could not offer you anything except his company and a porch swing that needed fixing. I was already crying, silently the way you cry when you do not want anyone to hear. You read to me when my eyes gave out. You brought me peach cobbler because you remembered it was your grandmother's recipe and you got it right every time. Maggie would have been proud. I was proud. Ruth's hand was on my back. Firm. Steady. You never asked for anything. Not a dime, not a favor, not a thank you. You just showed up. Week after week, year after year, you showed up. My dad was looking at me now. For the first time in this room, he was actually seeing me. I do not think he liked what he saw, which was someone who had done the one thing he could not be bothered to do. I did not leave you everything because you earned it, Andrea. I left it to you because you are the only one who never treated it like something to earn. Finch paused. He let that line settle. Then the total estate after taxes and legal fees is valued at approximately $2.3 million. The number landed in the room like a stone in still water. Ripples everywhere. Patty inhaled sharply. Dave closed his eyes. Greg's face went through something I can only describe as a controlled demolition. The structure held, but you could see the cracks spreading. Diane stared straight ahead. Her hand had stopped trembling. It was balled into a fist. $2.3 million and every cent of it mine. Finch was not finished. He turned the page. And Greg, I owe you an apology too. That got my dad's attention. His head came up. A flicker of something hope maybe crossed his face. I gave you everything when you were young. Every toy you pointed at, every car you wrecked, every bill I covered, every mess I cleaned up. I bailed you out of debt 3 times before you turned 30, and I never once made you feel the weight of it. I thought I was being a good father. I was wrong. Greg's jaw loosened just barely. I never taught you how to build something, Greg. I only taught you how to receive. That was my failure as a father, and I have carried that guilt longer than you know. I watched my dad's face. Something was happening behind his eyes. Some tectonic shift he was not ready for. An emotion he did not have a filing system for. But understanding where entitlement comes from does not mean I should reward it. I love you, son, and I hope that one day you will build something of your own. Not because you have to, because you deserve to know what that feels like. Diane leaned forward. So he admits it. Her voice was venomous, triumphant. He made Greg this way. He just said so. Ruth turned to her. He admitted his part. What about yours? The words hung in the air. Diane opened her mouth. Nothing came out. She closed it, opened it again, closed it. Pastor Jim bowed his head slightly the way he did during prayer. But he was not praying. He was giving Diane the courtesy of not watching her drown. Grandpa Walter did not hate his son. I understood that now. He was disappointed. And disappointment, when it runs that deep, when it spans decades, is so much heavier than hate. Hate burns out. Disappointment just sits there year after year waiting for someone to prove it wrong. Nobody ever did. Finch turned to the final passage. The handwriting on the page was smaller here. I could see it from my seat. Grandpa had been running out of room, or maybe running out of time. Andrea, use this money to build the life you deserve. Buy a house, travel. Go back to school if you want. Do whatever makes you feel like the ground is solid under your feet. I pressed my palms flat on the table. Steady. Stay steady. But more than any of that, do not ever let anyone make you feel guilty for being loved. Do not apologize for it. Do not shrink from it. You are not taking something from your father. You are receiving something from your grandfather. There is a difference. Ruth was crying silently like me. The Townsend way, I guess. And if your parents try to take this from you, and they will remember, I chose you not as punishment for them, as a gift to you, because you are the best of this family, and someone needed to say it while there was still time. Finch folded the letter, placed it on the table, removed his glasses, and set them beside it. 10 seconds of silence. Maybe more. The kind of silence that has texture. You can feel it pressing against your skin. Pastor Jim stood slowly, walked to the head of the table, and shook Harold Finch's hand. Did not say a word. Just shook it and sat back down. Greg stood up. His face had gone from red to gray. He looked at the letter, at Finch, at me. We are contesting this, he said. His voice was flat, emptied out. Every single word. He took Diane by the arm. She grabbed her handbag, the new one, the one she had bought for the occasion, and they walked out. The door closed behind them with a click that sounded like a period at the end of a very long sentence. Nobody followed them. The room felt different after they left. Lighter, emptier, but in a way that made it easier to breathe. Finch waited a full minute before speaking. He was good at that. Reading a room, knowing when people needed space. Andrea, he said. Are you all right? I almost laughed. I do not know. Are you supposed to feel all right after something like that? A faint smile. In my experience, no. What happens if they contest? I asked. Finch reached into his portfolio and produced one more document. The man was a magician with that leather bag. Your grandfather included a no contest clause in the will. It is standard, but effective. If any beneficiary or potential beneficiary challenges the will in court and loses, they forfeit any claim to personal effects, keepsakes, heirlooms, or other items not specifically addressed in the estate distribution, meaning, if your father contests and fails, which given the physician certifications, the witnesses, and the video, Finch nodded. 6 months before his passing, Walter asked me to arrange a video recording. He sits in his room at sunrise. Meadows looks directly into the camera, and explains his decision in full. He is articulate, lucid, and Finch allowed himself a small, sad smile, rather blunt. I leaned back in my chair. Grandpa had not just written a letter. He had built a case. Layer by layer, document by document, over years. This was not rage. This was a man who knew exactly what was coming and made sure the truth would outlive him. I am not going to fight them, I said, but I am not giving back what Grandpa chose to give me. Finch nodded. I would not expect anything less. Your grandfather certainly did not. Ruth squeezed my shoulder. Pastor Jim buttoned his jacket and said one thing before he left. Walter would have been very calm about all of this. Just like you. I did not feel calm, but I was learning. 3 weeks later, Greg hired a lawyer. A guy from Cincinnati with a billboard on I-71. Family disputes. We fight for you. That kind of lawyer. The claim was diminished capacity. My father alleged that Grandpa Walter lacked the mental competence to alter his will in 2022, and that I had exerted undue influence during my visits. Undue influence. The legal term for she read him books and brought him cobbler. Finch responded with the physician certifications. 2 independent doctors, both board certified, both confirming Walter's full cognitive function at the time of signing. He followed that with a copy of the video. I never saw the video myself. Finch told me about it afterward. Grandpa Walter sitting in his room at Sunrise Meadows. Clean shirt, combed hair, looking straight into the lens. The television behind him was off. The bed was made. He had prepared for this like he prepared for everything. Carefully, deliberately, with the quiet dignity that defined his whole life. He stated his name, the date, and his reasons. He named Greg. He named Diane. He named me. And he explained in his own words exactly why he had made the choice he made. Finch said Grandpa's voice did not shake once. That he spoke for 12 minutes straight without notes, without pausing, without looking away from the camera. 81 years old, sitting in a room with linoleum floors and a mattress stain. And he was more composed than anyone in that conference room had been. Greg's lawyer watched the video in Finch's office. According to Finch, the man sat quietly for 12 minutes, then advised Greg to drop the case. Fighting a video like that in front of a probate judge was a losing proposition, and the no contest clause made losing expensive. Greg called me that night one last time. You stole my father from me, he said. I held the phone with both hands. I could hear my mom in the background saying something sharp I could not make out. No, Dad, I said. You left him. I just did not. He hung up. Diane blocked my number on every platform within the hour. Phone, email, social media. All of it. Gone. I stood in my kitchen and waited for the guilt to hit, the devastation. The crushing realization that I just lost my parents. It did not come. Or maybe it had come a long time ago, and I just had not noticed when it left. News travels at the speed of sound in a town like Millbrook, maybe faster. Nobody published anything. Nobody had to. Pastor Jim did not gossip. That was not his way. But when a congregation member asked how Greg was handling everything, he simply said Walter made his wishes very clear. In Millbrook, that is a sentence that does a lot of heavy lifting. The neighbors on Oak Hill Road, the ones who had watched Greg disappear, who had seen my car pulling into Sunrise Meadows every Sunday, who had watched Diane pose for that one Facebook photo and never return, they were not surprised. Mrs. Patterson, who had lived next door for 30 years, told me, "We always wondered why you were the only one who came. I guess your grandfather was wondering the same thing." Diane's standing in the community quietly dissolved. She was not kicked out of the Women's Fellowship at First Methodist. That is not how small towns work. She just stopped being invited to things. The phone calls dried up. The committee chair positions went to other people. Nobody was cruel about it. They simply stopped pretending. Greg had to sell the boat, the 26-foot Sea Ray he had bought with the money from Grandpa's house. The house Grandpa did not even know was being sold until Helen Patterson called him crying. Greg sold it to cover the legal fees from the failed contest. It went for less than he paid. Boats always do. Ruth told me she had seen it listed online, $42,000. The listing said motivated seller. That is real estate language for desperate. I heard all of this from Ruth. I did not look it up. I did not Google my parents' names or check Diane's Facebook. I did not need to. The point was never to watch them fall. The point was to stop breaking my own back trying to hold them up. There is a word for the feeling I had in those weeks after everything settled. It is not satisfaction. That implies I enjoyed it and I did not. It is not relief exactly because there was still a heaviness I carried everywhere. The closest word I can find is clarity. Like I had been looking at my family through frosted glass my whole life, and someone had finally wiped it clean. The picture was not pretty, but at least it was real. The first night I slept in Grandpa's house, I did not sleep. I sat in his armchair, the brown leather one with the cracked left arm, and looked at the room he had lived in for almost 50 years. The bookshelves he had built himself, the framed photo of him and Grandma Maggie on their wedding day, 1965, her in a simple white dress, him in a suit that was slightly too big, both of them grinning like they had gotten away with something. I did not feel like I had won. I felt like I had been handed something enormous and fragile, and I was terrified of dropping it. I opened the drawer of his desk, the same desk where my parents had been rifling through folders the day after the funeral, and found a small leather-bound notebook, dark brown, worn soft at the edges. I opened it. Dates. Hundreds of them. In Grandpa's handwriting, shaky near the end, but always legible. Every entry the same format. Date, time I arrived, time I left, and a brief note. Sunday, March 3rd, 2019. Andrea arrived 10:15 a.m. Left 4:30 p.m. Read 2 chapters of East of Eden. Sunday, June 14th, 2020. Andrea arrived 9:45 a.m. Left 5:00 p.m. Brought peach cobbler. Reminds me of Maggie. Sunday, November 22nd, 2020. Andrea arrived 10:00 a.m. Left 3:15 p.m. First snow. She scraped my windshield before she left. Sunday, April 4th, 2021. Andrea arrived 10:30 a.m. Left 4:00 p.m. Easter. She brought daffodils. Nobody else called. Sunday, December 25th, 2022. Andrea arrived 8:00 a.m. Left 6:00 p.m. Christmas. She brought a small tree for my room. We watched It Is a Wonderful Life. She cried at the ending. I did too, but I do not think she noticed. 4 years. Over 200 entries. Every single visit I had ever made catalogued in a notebook he kept in his desk like a treasure. Some entries had little additions. Good day. She looked tired, but she never said so. Or she fixed the remote for my TV. Would not let me call maintenance. Or simply Sunday. Andrea came. He had been keeping count. The whole time he had been keeping count. I turned to the last page. Below the final entry, a Sunday 3 weeks before he died, he had written one more line in a hand, so unsteady, it was almost illegible. I do not deserve her, but I am grateful. I closed the notebook, held it against my chest, and for the first time since the funeral, I let myself fall apart completely. 3 months later, I moved to Millbrook full-time. I transferred to the Millbrook branch of the county library system. It was smaller than the Columbus location, 1 floor, 3 staff, a children's section that smelled like graham crackers, but the building had tall windows that let in good light, and on Tuesdays a group of retirees came in for book club and argued about plot twists, like it was a competitive sport. Grandpa would have loved it. I used a portion of the inheritance to establish a scholarship, the Walter Townsend Community Scholarship, $5,000 a year awarded to a Millbrook High School graduate pursuing vocational training in construction carpentry or skilled trade. It was not flashy. It was not a wing of a building with his name on it. It was the kind of thing Grandpa valued, practical, useful, and given to someone who was willing to build something with their hands. Ruth started coming over for dinner every Wednesday. She would bring a bottle of wine she claimed was medicinal, and we would sit on the porch, the swing finally fixed. I had had it repaired the first week, and talk about Grandpa, about Grandma Maggie, about the old days before everything went sideways. I started therapy in January not because of the money, because I needed someone to help me untangle 30 years of walking on eggshells in my own family. The therapist's name was Dr. Reeves, and in our second session she said something that stopped me cold. You have been managing your parents' emotions since you were a child. That is not loyalty, that is labor. I sat with that for a long time. The house on Oak Hill Road feeling like mine. I replanted Grandma Maggie's hydrangeas. I left Grandpa's bookshelves exactly the way they were. I hung a new photo next to the wedding picture, one of me and Grandpa on the porch swing taken by Ruth 2 summers ago, both of us laughing at something I cannot remember. It did not matter what we were laughing at. It mattered that we were there. 6 months after the will, reading a letter arrived, handwritten. My mother's stationery. The expensive cream-colored kind with her initials embossed at the top. I recognized it immediately. She used it for thank you notes and passive-aggressive correspondence in equal measure. I opened it standing at the kitchen counter, still holding my coffee. Andrea, we are your parents. We raised you. We fed you. We gave you every opportunity. Your grandfather was a bitter, manipulative old man who spent his last years poisoning you against your own family. He used his money to divide us, and you let him. We deserve better than this. Greg is devastated. He lost his father and his daughter in the same year. I hope you are satisfied. You have our number when you are ready to do the right thing. Mom. I read it twice, put it on the counter, drank my coffee. No apology, no acknowledgement of the blocked phone number of the nursing home of the house sold, without a word of the Facebook photo, and the 14 minutes on her phone of the eulogy that got the book title wrong. Nothing. Just demands dressed up as grief, entitlement wrapped in the language of motherhood. I noticed she wrote, "We raised you." Present tense confidence in past events, as if raising me gave them permanent ownership over my decisions. As if feeding a child entitles you to their inheritance. As if obligation and love are the same thing. They are not the same thing. I learned that on a porch swing in Millbrook, Ohio, from a man who never confused the two. I sat at Grandpa's desk, my desk now, and wrote back. It took me 20 minutes and 4 drafts. The final version was 3 sentences. Mom, I received your letter. I hope you and Dad. I am not ready to talk, and I do not know when I will be. I wish you both the best. I signed it. Andrea. Not love, not your daughter. Just my name. I sealed the envelope, walked it to the mailbox, and put the flag up. I did not write back out of anger. I wrote back because complete silence felt like I was becoming them. And I refused to become them. I went back inside, washed my coffee mug, fed the cat a tabby named Walter Jr., who had shown up on the porch in November and never left. The letter was done. The boundary was set. And for the first time, holding the line did not feel like cruelty. It felt like breathing. I am sitting on the porch as I tell you this. It is a Tuesday evening. The oak tree in the front yard is enormous. Grandpa planted it the year he and Maggie moved in 1966. 60 years of growing. It is taller than the house now. I did not get rich from this story. I know 2.3 million sounds like a lot, but after estate taxes, legal fees, the scholarship fund, and the repairs, this old house needed new roof, new furnace. The plumbing was a disaster. What I have is enough. Enough to stop worrying about rent. Enough to work a job I love without wondering if I can make the car payment. Enough to breathe. But the real inheritance was never the money. It was permission. Permission to stop apologizing for being the person who showed up. Permission to stop feeling guilty every time I put myself first. Permission to look at my parents and say not out loud, not to their faces, just to myself quietly on a porch swing at dusk. I deserved better. And so did he. Grandpa Walter taught me something no number on a check could buy. That love is not a transaction. You do not owe someone your loyalty just because you share their blood. Loyalty is earned. Presence is earned. And when someone shows you year after year that you are only worth their attention when you have something they want, believe them. If you are watching this tonight, and you are the one in your family who always shows up, who drives the 2.5 hours, who makes the cobbler, who sits in the hospital chair, who gets nothing but silence in return, I see you. Grandpa Walter would have seen you too. The house is quiet now. The porch swing creaks in the wind, same as it always did. But this house is mine. And for the first time in 27 years, I do not have to justify that to anyone. There is one more thing I have not told you. A week after I moved in, I was organizing Grandpa's desk, moving things around, making space. The notebook, the one with all my visits logged, I had placed it on the bookshelf between Hemingway and a dog-eared copy of East of Eden. But that evening something made me pick it up again. I do not know why. Maybe the light was hitting it differently. Maybe I just needed to feel close to him. I opened it to the last page, the entry I had already read, the line at the bottom. I do not deserve her, but I am grateful. And then I saw it. Below that line, in smaller writing, different ink, a thinner pen scratched into the paper, like it took everything he had, was one more sentence. It must have been written days before he died. The letters trembled. Some of them barely held their shape. Andrea, if you are reading this, it means I am gone. Do not cry too long. Go live. That is all I ever wanted. I closed the notebook, held it for a while, placed it back on the shelf next to the Hemingway, right where it belonged. I walked out to the porch. The air smelled like cut grass and somebody's wood fire down the road. The oak tree rustled. The swing creaked. Millbrook was settling into evening the way it always does, slowly, easily, without any hurry at all. I sat down, took a breath, a real one, the kind that fills you all the way up. My name is Andrea Townsend. I am 27 years old, and I just inherited the most important thing my grandfather could give me: the right to choose my own life. If you really like our videos, please do not forget to like, share, and subscribe. Have a great day.